Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. There's a lot of things to cover today, so no intro, let's just go. Now, the most notable thing about the Kursk area, where Ukrainians are continuing their advances despite the fact that the slower down of the tempo, we're obviously are waiting right now on the resolution of the situation of Russian cauldron, the pocket that Russians find themselves in, locked within the river. But otherwise, the most notable thing that everyone is looking at is what's going to happen at the village of Korenevo. This is this area over here. And the confusion around this area, because it was reported many times that it was already fight for, there was already videos of Ukrainians inside the village, and there was a lot of misunderstanding. Why is that? Well, you know that situation when, for example, in Ukraine and also in Russia, there are villages that are sharing the same name, and then people would talk about the village, but actually it was something happening in a completely separate village. Well, it's kind of the same area of confusion, except it's worse. So Korenevo is actually not one village or town in this case, it's actually two. So I know there is a river that goes through the village, and normally that would be just, well, river. In this situation, there is a village of Korenevo, and then there is the town of Korenevo. So the village of Korenevo was where Ukrainians been confirmed controlling and capturing it, and this is what was confirmed for a while ago. Whereas the town of Korenevo, this is where the reports of Ukrainian forces still advancing and fighting for it. They're sharing exactly the same name, except no one specifies are they talking about the village or the town. So because of this confusion, there is still no clear understanding of what's the situation. But from what I've heard is that Ukrainians have been operating in this area, and there are news, positive news for Ukraine. I don't have more information, so at this point it's completely gray area, and we don't really know whether or not Ukrainians have really captured it. What we do know is that Russians actually already issued evacuation orders from this town of Rylsk for Russians to get out, which is not really an indicator of anything, but it's definitely good to know. All in all, the Ukrainians have been pretty much stating what I was stating about the Kursk area. Dmitry from War Translated on Shitter has translated this message over here, and basically the Ukrainian armed forces, they are confirming that indeed the situation right now is being taken slow. Ukrainians are just squeezing the Russians in that cauldron that was created, just trying to get them to essentially either surrender or run, because they still have some resources, but because the resources are gonna get scarcer and scarcer, if that's a way to use that word, and at the end, Ukrainians will just take over territory with minimal casualties, capturing a lot of equipment. That's the expectations, and it seems that this is going to be the outcome. With the other front lines, there has been Ukrainian advances, and Ukrainians have been having marginal success around the area of Kremina, so around the forest of Kremina. So that's great to hear. Around the Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut direction. So here, despite all of the tries of Russians to get into Chasiv Yar, all of the reports of them trying to get past this channel, they have not came to fruition. So yes, there supposedly is activity of some Russians trying to cross the channel, but so far the reports are that they've been destroyed here. So despite the fact that there are some forces encolored beyond the river, there are also reports that Russians are being kicked out. Situation in New York. This is probably the most weirdest situation that have been described so far. So Ukrainians describe situation in New York that it's a complete mix of a gray zone areas. So New York, there can be a building that is held by Ukrainians, and then the next building held by Russians, and then the third building held by Ukrainians, and then another one held by Russians, and so on. So it's a complete checkered mismatch of this whole area. It's been colored red significantly, but in reality, majority of it is a gray zone. Less clear situation is around Toretsk. The battle for Toretsk is now in swing. Russians have entered some of the outskirts of the city, but I'm expecting this to be a grind, though I will still not be surprised if at some point within maybe 2-3 weeks Toretsk will be taken, which is going to be a problematic issue for the Chasiv Yar defenders, as this will secure the southern flank for the defenders around Chasiv Yar and so on, and Russians will be able to essentially flank them from the south, which is not going to be nice. Then the most hardest of direction is the Pokrovsk direction. Here Russians have entered the first kind of border town, the pre-town of Novogrodivka, and they're advancing relatively fast. Grodivka, the same as I predicted. Right now, Russians are not advancing as fast. Here, Ukrainians most likely will withdraw to the other side at some point. So there will be this channel that goes through the city, and it will be guarded at some point along this channel. So far, it seems that it's unlikely that in August Russians will get past Grodivka and Selidova. Like the main line kind of is, the main two strongholds is Grodivka and Selidova in this area. Novogrodivka as well, but if Russians just capture Novogrodivka, which is in the middle, then they cannot really just advance because they still have weaknesses from the flank attacks, right? So that's why it's crucial for them to capture also Novogrodivka and Selidova. So before that, I would not be expecting major advances to Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk-Mirnograd is going to be a big problem for Russians, despite the area in there being relatively flat, not as hilly and Bakhmut. It is still a big challenge for Russians, and reaching Pokrovsk is not the same as taking Pokrovsk. So I'm expecting that Russian offensive will culminate, maybe them reaching Pokrovsk. In other areas, it is reported that Russian activity has overall fallen down, and Ukrainians are finding opportunities to strike back at Russians. They're finding opportunities to poke at the Russians and so on. And for example, here is a fresh video from Belgorod area, where on the border town of Novostroivka, Ukrainians have posted their flag being flown right now on some of the tower in the area. That town is literally right on the border. It's located right over here. So it's not a deep penetration, but it's a little bit of a poking and discussion. But then the most important news happened, which a lot of people have been reporting. Like I made a post on my community post that something is happening and so on, and it's sometimes it's very vague, because sometimes it's Ukrainians is like, oh, there's certain things happening on the border, wait for the good news, and I'm like, oh my god, because I'm following and I'm thinking about maybe there's going to be additional incursion and so on. But no, in this case, what we got on the border movement, which is absolutely for every Ukrainian, for Ukraine, and for humanity in ourselves, is much more important than any arrows or maps or taking anything, is Ukrainian captives coming back to Ukraine, which is great news. So Russians that said no more exchange with Ukraine, no more changing personnel, they finally decided to change at least the first 115 people for the Ukrainian prisoners of war, and now the Ukrainians will happily get back home. It's amazing news. It really warms up my heart, specifically because it was also on Ukrainian Independence Day. There is a very interesting video of Abrams M1, and with this I really want to mention that Abrams M1 has both shown that when it is good terrain, when there is ground that is firm enough for it to operate, it can deliver results. Ukrainians are actually stating that Abrams have been doing quite a good job. It has been destroying a lot of Russian equipment. So despite all of us being like, so where are the Abrams? They're operational, they're doing and delivering good results. And the same, for example, was German Marder. While Bradleys were kind of the star of the shows and stating just how good they are, German Marder infantry fighting vehicles has shown themselves to be really good in the offensive action that Ukrainians executed in the Kursk offensive, so Ukrainians have also rated it very, very highly. In all seriousness, it's great that the Western equipment is so good, so much more Ukrainian lives are preserved, and this is making me very, very happy. But then the major news that have been happening, a second video in a row where I'm covering certain strikes. And in this case, there was a strike in Voronezh against the ammunition stockpile. It was a big stockpile in Voronezh, and it was struck, and it was it exploded with the secondary explosions for almost a full day plus, for over 24 hours. So it was incredible amount of ammunition in that. But the main point is not that this facility was hit. It is what it was hit with. Because Ukrainians have unveiled their new type of drone named PANICS, and this drone is incredible. It's a jet-powered drone with 500 kilometers per hour top speed, with a range of about 500 kilometers. Again, it's a bit classified, but it's approximate. The warhead is about 20 kilograms or so. So it has a bit of a punch, and it has a range, and it has the speed, which creates even more problems now for Russian aviation and jets and Russian facilities. Biggest problem for Ukrainian strikes, that they're striking not with the missiles but with drone on the Russian territory, is the drones that Ukraine is using are relatively slow. So Russians have time to react. For example, if Ukrainians want to strike the aviation depots or want to strike the jets that are standing on the runway, then these jets have plenty of time to take off. With a fast flying drone, fast mover drone, this is not going to be possible. And Ukrainians are flexing their muscles a bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but the main point is that Belarus has been pulling some troops towards the border with Ukraine, and Ukrainians have issued official statements stating, don't. Just don't. And it's an important change of narratives, as we stated before, because so far Belarus definitely didn't show that they want to be in this war. Lukashenko is a pretty smart politician, despite everything, right? He's an autocrat, but he's a smart autocrat. Not in a sense that he is good, smart, and good. No, I mean, he is terrible. He's a terrible dictator, and he needs to go in jail or hang by the neck until he's dead. But the fact is that he understands when the situation is favorable to him and when the situation is not favorable to him. At the start of the war, he was like, yeah, sure, Putin, I will support you with everything. And then as the time went by, and as it was more and more obvious that Putin's adventure in Ukraine was turning sour, he understood that very fast, and he moved away. The Belarus and Belarusian forces, they've established factories to help backfill needs for Russians. They have been sending a lot of equipment from the Belarusian army to be used by Russian military. They have been pulling a lot of effort to make Russian military more capable, but they were getting out of any possibility of conflict with Ukraine. And they were doing it before, but they were also trying to, play big. They were trying to make it scary, to kind of show around as like, yeah, we totally can jump in at any moment if only Ukraine doesn't look our way. And this is basically Ukrainians calling their bluff. This is an important change of narratives, and this is linked to the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk. And finally, the topic about France arresting Pavel Durov. Now, Pavel Durov is the owner of the Telegram. Telegram is the biggest social network in Russia, right after Kontakte, which is like internal Russia. But Telegram is the biggest network on mobile. It is also the biggest network that is being used by the Russian Z propagandists, by the Russian military, because Russian military has zero solutions for a proper communications. They've defaulted to use Telegram, and Telegram has been used to coordinate strikes against Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian military targets. It has been used to gather donations and monetize. So the platform was paying money to the people that are gathering money to support the Russian occupation army and killing of more Ukrainians. It was a platform that actively promoted channels which promoted the genocide against Ukrainians. And that is in a context of Ukrainian war. When we go into the context of everything, this is the same platform that allowed terrorist activity in Europe, where it was constantly, time after time, we had terror acts in Europe, and we find out that they were communicating in Telegram to try to make sure that they can strike against civilian targets. It is the network that has been used to sell child pornography, for human trafficking, slave trade. All of these things were set up in this platform because it has closed encryption keys that allows for direct encryption, and no government supposedly has access to the encryption keys. So they cannot see this activity. And it all would be kind of, understandable, though I would not probably like it, but it would be understandable if we say it's like, yes, but also Pavel Durov, he's not cooperating with any government at all. He's just a Russian billionaire, and he's just, not trying to be like free speech absolutists. So there is like a platform for all of these shady activities or whatnot. And the issue with that is that is not true. Pavel Durov has been cooperating with the government of Iran. He has been cooperating with the government of Russia, where he has been going after the opposition, Russian opposition. I know it's dog shit, but the point was still there. It has been cooperating with other dictatorial regimes. Pavel Durov was just spitting in the face of democracies. All of the requests beforehand about democracies, he was just expressing that he's above the law, that he's above it. It is not gonna bother him, because for him, authoritarian regime can get him killed. They can try to take his assets, stuff like this. In democracy, well, if police comes, he can always hire the best lawyers, pay them many millions of dollars, and then these cases will be dragged in court until oblivion. So for him, like any of these big tech bros that are trying to cushion up with the dictatorial regimes, it's easier for them to operate with dictatorial regimes. And Pavel Durov is no friend of democracy, is no friend of free speech, because he has been moderating the activity on Telegram on other channels. So in France, he got charged essentially with lack of moderation of the platform for, I believe, slave trade and child pornography and other things. And this comes, I know a lot of the conspiracy theorists are right now discussing that it is because, just right now it's useful, that this is only pretext for his capture. But we have been kind of on a wave in Europe with discussing about what is the social media, specifically this encrypted type social media, that are not allowing our security services to access the information. How are they operating, and how should we look at this? You've probably heard about beef of European Union with Elon Musk about certain things, and Pavel Durov just falls in kind of in the same trend that is ongoing right now in Europe, and France has been on the forefront for a lot of these things. So I am not surprised that he has been detained. All in all, He's not your friend. He's not a friend of free speech. The fact that all of these Z bloggers, all of the Russian military are right now running with their head on fire, asking, like putting the paper planes as a nice peaceful act of support of this poor Russian fellow, like a multi-billionaire that is operating with the dictatorial regimes. He is now, like, these Z bloggers and Russian neo-Nazis as well are supporting these activities. And when people are starting to support this and pro-Russian, I mean, what else do you need to say? If you want to support something, I would suggest you support the Ukraine ADOPS and our fundraiser. So here is Rima with a special message to you all guys.
Hi everyone, today I'm here with the 8th Regiment of Special Operation Forces of Ukraine. We are delivering a big package to them as they are fighting in a coast direction. So you can see we have a large EcoFlow, a generator, FPV drones, Mavic 3T, power banks, water filters that are very important in this direction at the moment, some tourniquets, a very powerful jammer, and we would like to extend our special thanks to Satoshi for the provided solar panels for self units. Yes, we would also like to thank YouTube channels Ukraine Matters, Warthog Defense, and Combat Veteran Reacts for their continued support and especially support in supporting of this fundraiser.
Хочемо від лиця 8-го полку подякувати за надану допомогу фонду Ukraine ADOPS та волонтеру Римі за надану допомогу. Дуже вдячні.
I think that was awesome. So I will call on you again. We are trying to finalize this fundraiser before the end of August. We are barely 8,500, almost just a little bit more left until we can do it. So please, if you have a $5 to spend, join up. Let's finish up for the Ukrainian armed forces that are fighting right now on the front lines. Let's support Ukraine. I love you. Slava Ukraini. And I see you next time.
I see you